Hey guys. I've decided to tell you a really life-changing story. It happens like this: you live side by side with a person, you build a future together, you trust them as if they were your own. And then bam, it turns out that your closest person is, to put it mildly, not quite honest. So much so that it's disgusting to even think about it. Does that sound familiar? Except in my story it was much worse. My dear beloved saintly spouse found an interesting hobby: to go to the left for money, and not just like that, but with some grandfather who is able to pay for her, warmth and care. You should have seen her face when I decided to play with her dreams and hopes a little. In this story, you'll see how betrayal can turn into a great opportunity for original revenge. There will be something at the end that will definitely not leave you indifferent. So make yourself comfortable. There is a lot of interesting things ahead.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes. Dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
Friends, what a story it is. You live with a person for almost 10 years, you share shelter, breakfast, plans for life. You think you know her like the back of your hand. And then bam. It's like a lightning bolt. No, I'd say it's like a cold shower on a freezing day. It's both painful and funny at the same time. Funny because you've been taken for a fool, painful because you believed it yourself, blindly and stupidly. And here I am, Alex, 35 years old, living in this gloomy small town, working as they say for pennies, but I have to live somehow. I loved my Lana, or maybe I just got used to her, after so many years, who knows. She always seemed to be there for me, and life seemed bearable. Until one day not so long ago I began to notice. Those little changes that you can't see with a simple eye, but if you look closely, you can see that something is wrong. Lana used to talk about living a modest life, dreaming of a cottage, planting potatoes. And now suddenly she's talking about foreign resorts, about how one could live if one had money. They say, we would buy a house on the sea, go to Italy every year, live beautifully. I listen to all this and think, well, it's not bad to dream, right? Especially since she always talked about money. I won't hide it, we didn't become financial geniuses. But something has changed, and this something I began to dislike. Our story begins quite calmly. My name is Alex, 35 years old, married for almost 10 years to Lana. As they say, marriage is strong, tested by time and all the small troubles that people have. We live in our small but so dark and damp town. Everything seems to be going well in our life. My job is not very good, but I have some money, so we always have enough for everything we need. Lana, my dear, was particularly fond of dreaming of a better life. You know how it is, you are riding in a bus, outside the window are dull panel houses and puddles, and my wife next to her dreams of how we will someday be on the coast, bathing in the sun, not in rainwater. I have always treated it with humor. Think about it, a man dreams, no one forbids it. But lately she's been going off the charts. That she watches movies about the rich, beautiful and successful, then constantly about the opportunities in life argues. Like, if we had extra money, we would live like people. And I, what can I hide, did not pay attention. And frankly speaking, I thought that she was just talking, as many wives talk. For them it's something like a hobby. To cry, dream, to spread everything on the shelves, and the next day they do not remember what they talked about. That's how they lived. But one day, one quiet fall evening, Lana comes in and says that her colleague introduced her to some big businessman. Yeah, I think, a big businessman in our town? Only fat Dostin from the butcher store, and he only goes to the market once a month. It turned out that this businessman, Liam, not only had time to shine in our city, but also invited her to some evening, like a corporate party or something like that. Of course, I immediately got a slight alarm signal inside me. But aloud I just hummed, "Go if you want so much." And it's been like that ever since. Then they had dinner, then some meetings, then some expensive gifts suddenly appeared. Lana blossomed, her eyes lit up, her mood was great, and she somehow forgot about gray everyday life. And at such moments you suddenly begin to wonder what kind of friendship she has with this Liam. At first I thought, okay, maybe she just enjoys the attention, all this tinsel. A woman sometimes needs such things, purely for self-esteem. Well, and I as a husband should show wisdom, say, let her flirt. But the further, the more it all strained me. Already, and the phone she began to hide from me somehow began to hide, and come home late, then with gifts, then with new jewelry. And when I ask where we got all this good, she just laughs and says that we earned it ourselves, and you, Alex, do not meddle in our affairs. Now that's something else, don't you think? A few weeks went by. One evening I, quite by accident, came across her phone, which she left in the kitchen. I decided to see what my dear wife was so interested in. I opened the messages and it was hard to doubt anything else. There in the photo, and their common conversations, everything is so that leaves no room for illusions. Right in front of me, proof that my wife found how to earn extra money. And this grandpa, her businessman, is paying very generously for Herb's services. Well, what can I say? My first reaction was to throw the phone against the wall and call her immediately. But then I somehow slowed down. I'm not a man of action either. I decided that a scandal now, it's too trivial. I should do everything so that Lana would realize how much she missed. That's how I stood in the kitchen, holding her phone in my hands and looking at all these correspondence. I'll be honest, I had mixed feelings. First anger, then resentment, then just some wild fatigue. 10 years together, I thought that with this woman has bound life, and here on top of that. You feel like a fool. But I still calmed down, took control of myself and realized, just so this matter cannot be left. But to make a banal scene of jealousy, a scandal for the whole house, well no guys, it's not for me. I want to take revenge, so that Lana would remember who Alex was for a long time. That's said and done. I started to think how to approach this case with wisdom, so that she would get the full, and I myself enjoyed her fall from the heart. And then I got an idea. What if we put on a little show for her? Why not play on her greed, since she wants a rich life so badly? You know what they say, if you want to find a sore spot, hit her weaknesses. So I decided to hit her where she wasn't expecting it. The plan was quick and simple. I had to convince her that I had a huge inheritance. Yes, as if some distant relative had suddenly left me a fortune. Does that sound unrealistic? It is. But that's the thing. Lana had become so obsessed with dreams of money out of nowhere in recent months that she would believe it herself. I was 100% sure she'd fall for it. The first thing I did was to go to a lawyer I knew, who agreed to help me for a small fee. He and I drew up all the necessary documents, made copies, certificates, and even a couple of bank certificates, faked to make it look convincing. According to the legend, I received an inheritance from some uncle, we'll call him Victor, who lived far away from our city and died, leaving me a decent fortune. I accidentally left the documents in a conspicuous place for Lana to discover. And so one evening when I came home she, as expected, was already sitting with these papers in her hands, reading, looking at the numbers and literally could not believe her eyes. I'll be honest, it was something. You should have seen her face, a mixture of greed, surprise, and some desperate desire to believe what she was seeing. Caught my game instantly. Alex, is it true? You're rich now? She blurted out, barely holding back a smile. I only grinned and, pretending to be a little offended by her disbelief, confirmed, well, what do you think? I can't believe it myself, but yes, this is our future. And she immediately started dreaming, talked about traveling, about buying a new home. Right in front of my eyes she became so caring, so sweet, even now put her as an example to all wives. Threw even a hint, say, now that we have the opportunity, is not it time for her to still leave work and take care of the house? Aha. Naturally, I continued to pique her interest. I started telling her how we would now have bank accounts, how we could afford anything we wanted. Hinted at expensive restaurants, talked about the opportunities that were now open to us. I was surprised at how easily she fell for it. Just a little while ago I was just an Alex, and suddenly I was the source of all her dreams. She jumped around me, trying to please me, smiling and making plans for the future. It was obvious that she didn't need Liam anymore, because now she had a rich husband by her side. It was as if she had forgotten that not so long ago she used to go out in the evenings with another man. Then I realized it was time. I decided to squeeze her to the full, to make it so that she finally lost her head from these riches. Agree, if a person is so much carried away by dreams, let them pay for his greed. After all, there's a reason she decided that money was more important than our family. After that evening, when Lana saw the inheritance papers, her greed had gotten the best of her. Now every day started with her talking about what she would do with the money, what dresses she would buy, where we would go. I listened to her and only chuckled to myself. She was so engrossed in these dreams that she even seemed to have forgotten about her friend Liam. She didn't need him now, because in her eyes she had a rich husband. That was the funniest part, how quickly she betrayed her former feelings as soon as she smelled money. I only had to add a little oil to the fire. In the evenings I began to tell her about plans for the future, as if I had started looking for a house for us somewhere near the sea, talking about possible investments, which allegedly threw me lawyers. She was literally living it up. And the more she was drawn into this sweet dream, the more I realized that my revenge was nearing completion. One night, when she had already completely lost her head from all these illusions, I decided to give her a little show. I picked up the phone and pretended I was talking to a lawyer. I said, yes, the inheritance is great, but you see we have to do some paperwork to make the money available. She was sitting next to me, looking at me with adoration. It seemed that she was about to throw herself at my feet for this inheritance. It was like I was some kind of living ATM machine to her. When the conversation was over, I turned to her and told her that all the documents were ready, and in a couple of weeks the money would be in our hands. And what do you think? Lana immediately started making plans for the coming months. Alex, let's buy a car. Can we go to the showroom next week and choose something cool? I only hummed and replied, but wait, let's first wait for all the papers, and then we'll decide what and how. But there was no stopping her. Every morning began with her questions about when the money would come, what we should buy, how we should spend it. I was getting a little tired of her chatter, to be honest. She was like a child who had been promised a new bicycle, and now he was waiting for it so eagerly that he was ready to sit at the window all day, looking at the road. Only here the bike was in the form of a bunch of zeros in a bank account. Finally, the day came when I decided to tell her the truth. I'd prepared for it in advance, picked a time when it was just the two of us at home. I arranged a dinner, put candles, in general, created a romantic atmosphere. She, of course, immediately began to guess that I wanted to tell her something important, but she could not even think what it was. We sat down at the table, I poured us some wine and said, Lana, you know, I have something to tell you. She froze, tensed, and I paused, savoring her anticipation. Then I smiled and said, you know, I know everything, don't I? She didn't understand what I was talking about, so I decided to explain. I know about you and Liam, about your meetings and all those gifts. I know everything, and you know what? It doesn't bother me anymore. She paled at first, then blushed, apparently trying to find an excuse. But I didn't let her get a word in edgewise. I told her how I'd figured it out from the beginning, how I'd found her correspondence, and how I decided to use her own greed to show her what kind of person she really was. Lana sat silent, eyes full of horror and bewilderment. And I continued, all these documents you've seen, they're forgeries. No inheritance exists. It was all a lie because I wanted to see how far you would go for money. And you know what the funny thing is? You fell for it from day one. She tried to say something like, Alex, it's not what you think, but I just grinned. Her words didn't matter anymore. She had betrayed our family, and now she was in complete isolation, betrayed by her own greed. I ended our conversation with words I was sure she would remember for a long time. It was as if an icy cold shower had descended upon her. Now you will be left empty-handed, light. There is no inheritance, and there never was. You traded me, our family, for the illusion of money and to meet this Liam of yours. So you can consider what you've really earned loneliness and a broken life. She sat in front of me, pale, as if all the blood had gone out of her face at once. Surprise, resentment, fear, all of it was changing on her face. And you know, in that moment I felt that my revenge had actually succeeded. I saw in her eyes her dreams of a rich life, of the beautiful future she had already drawn in her head crumble. Whatever it was, she realized that she had nothing to look forward to now. But I didn't want to stop there. I felt it was necessary to see it through to the end so that she was left with no illusions. I added, and you know what, Lana? It's not like I'm going to let it go or forgive it. I'm filing for divorce. Her eyes widened with horror, and she immediately rushed to plead, to say that it was a mistake, that she didn't mean anything by it, that she was just confused. But I was no longer interested in those excuses. And so when she realized that words would no longer help, I noticed her face begin to change. It went from pleading and horror to anger. She had expected a rich life, and now I was depriving her of it all. Her eyes turned ice cold, and she suddenly blurted out, well, go on, who are you anyway? You really can't live with a beggar like you. At least I have Liam, and you're just an empty place. I just grinned and replied, well, if you have Liam, go to him. I think he'll like having you hanging around his neck now, since you're so fond of luxury. But I'm sure that as soon as he realizes that your rich husband turned out to be a myth, his interest in you will quickly disappear. With people like him, a bright future with people like you is not built. With that, I got up and left the house, leaving her alone with her shattered dreams and empty illusions. To say that I was agitated was an understatement. Mixed feelings overwhelmed me, anger, satisfaction, and frankly, a slight fatigue. But still, I felt like a winner. This performance had given me what I wanted, the feeling that she was finally getting what she deserved. I went to a friend's house for a couple of days to give myself time to cool down and finally decide what to do next. And to give her time to realize the hole she'd put herself in. During this time Lana called me dozens of times, wrote me messages, first apologizing, then threatening me, and then going back to pleading. Apparently, she never realized that this number no longer worked for me. Sitting in a friend's kitchen with a cup of strong coffee, I thought about what to do next. Divorce was inevitable, but I wanted this ending to be one she would remember forever. I decided that after I filed for divorce, I needed to permanently cut off all avenues of normalcy for her. Yes, she hoped she could always come back to me, but this time she wouldn't have that chance. When I returned home a few days later, I walked into the apartment and saw that Lana was waiting for me. Apparently, she was sure that I would think about it and decide to forgive her. I calmly walked past her, heading toward our bedroom to gather my things. Lana followed behind me like a shadow, talking non-stop. "Alex, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. You realize it's all because we live in this poverty, that I'm so tired. I'm just confused. You can't leave me like this." "No, Lana," I answered calmly, not even turning toward her. "I can and I will. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. And it's this, I don't want to be with a woman who cares more about money than anything else. So no more pleading, it's done." She tried to stop me, grabbed my arm, started crying. But it didn't work on me anymore. I packed my things and realized that for the first time in a long time I felt free. She, seeing that my intentions were serious, turned to threats. "You'll regret it, Alex. Do you think it will be easy for you after the divorce? I'll take everything we have. You won't get a dime. You know I can go to court and file for alimony." Those words made me laugh out loud. Lana had always thought that everything revolved around her, that she could manipulate everyone and everything. I, grinning, replied, "Take what you want, Lana. You've already gotten what you deserve. And I can manage without it. After all, I have what you no longer have, freedom and a clear conscience." At these words I left the apartment, leaving her alone. I walked out of the apartment feeling strangely relieved. It was getting dark outside, and the gloomy evening seemed to complete the picture of the final point in our marriage. I walked slowly down the street, thinking about what was next. Freedom, yes, it was with me now, but with it came emptiness. 10 years of a life built on trust shattered in an instant. But I needed that to let go. The days after I left flew by like a blur. The first thing I did, of course, was file for divorce. The process was underway, and I was determined to see it through. My friends supported me, although some of them wondered why I decided to make such a spectacle instead of just leaving at once. But I didn't tell anyone all the details. Why? This plan was for me, to make me feel like I had done justice. A few weeks passed. Lana tried to contact me, writing, calling, even coming to my friend's house where I was temporarily living. She begged me to give her a second chance, then accused me of ruining her life, then promised me again that everything would be different. But I didn't care. She was no longer a part of my world, and every time I saw her name on my phone screen, it only reminded me of her betrayal. And so, on one of those days, I decided I needed to make one more move. The final chord, so to speak, in this symphony. The thing is that Lana, used to high hopes and luxurious prospects, had long forgotten what it is to work and earn a living. I knew that after the divorce she would be looking for someone who could provide her usual level of comfort. And well, why not help her with that a little? I created a new reputation for her. Using the same photos and correspondence I found on her phone, I created a neat social media profile where she looked like a very attentive lady, ready to meet wealthy gentlemen. It was like a hint to all her potential admirers. Here she is, looking for someone generous and ready for a partnership. Of course, I didn't leave my contact information, but I made sure that her new friends could contact her directly. Maybe it was a cruel thing to do. But in moments when you feel cheated and betrayed, rules start to seem like conventions. I'll be honest, it amused me a little. I didn't know how long it would take before she realized that her reputation was now in the hands of random people, but it was important to me that she felt the consequences of her actions. A few more weeks passed, and I began to notice that my actions were beginning to bear fruit. Lana stopped contacting me, and her attempts to talk or influence me in any way disappeared. Apparently, she finally realized that there was no going back, that all bridges were burned for her. I heard rumors that her friend Liam, having learned that there was no inheritance and her husband, an ordinary guy without a fortune, quickly evaporated. Apparently, his interest in her was also primarily dictated by her stories about her supposedly rich husband. Lana is now alone. Her hopes for a luxurious life had been dashed, and she faced the stark question of how to live her life. I sometimes heard from acquaintances that she tried to look for a job, but in our small town she had a reputation of not being the most reliable and decent lady. The local good tongues had already spread the rumors, and her resume was hardly taken seriously by anyone. She faced the reality she'd always wanted to escape: emptiness, poverty, and lack of support. And me? I moved on. Of course, you can't forget these things right away, but I was getting better every day. I began to socialize more with friends, went out into nature, began to think about changing jobs and possibly moving to another city. These thoughts of a fresh start seemed liberating. A new phase in my life had begun, and I wanted to leave all these unpleasant experiences behind. However, one day I suddenly received a message from her. Simple, short, almost desperate. "Alex, talk to me." Apparently, she realized that her situation had become hopeless. Her pride was gone, only her pleading. I decided to answer. Probably out of curiosity, or maybe to see how she would justify herself. We met at one of the old cafes we used to frequent together. She looked tired, even haggard, as if life had sucked all the strength out of her over the months. I sat down across from her, silently waiting to hear what she had to say. "Alex, I know what you've done to my reputation. Please leave me alone." Her voice was quiet, as if she was afraid someone would hear her pleas. "You wanted to live at the expense of others, Lana. Now live with it," I replied calmly. "You've always wanted more, and now you've got it. Only it doesn't seem to be quite what you expected." She tried to explain herself, to justify herself, but I knew that nothing else would change. She had lost not only me, but the beautiful life she so desperately wanted. Lana tried to justify herself, telling me that she never wanted to be betrayed, that it was all a mistake caused by her greed and foolish dreams. She begged me to give her another chance, saying that she realized her mistake and realized that she had lost the most important person in her life. It seemed like this whole lesson had actually made her more cautious. But I didn't care anymore. "Lana," I said, sighing, "you always wanted a better life, but you took the lowest path. In your dreams, I was just a means to an end. You were willing to trade our life for empty illusions and money that didn't even belong to you." She was silent, looking away, realizing that all words wouldn't change anything. I knew that deep down she was waiting for me to take pity on her, to forgive her and take her back. All those years together and all that. But it was over for me when I saw her correspondence, when I realized how easily she could betray me. "You know, Lana," I continued, "I don't need this conversation anymore. I've given you everything I could and more. I've worked hard for us, built our life, put up with your whims. But now that you've ruined all that, nothing you say will bring it back. You're left with what you chose." She tried to grasp at the last straw once more, talking about how she'd changed, how it had been a terrible time, how she'd realized the value of a real relationship. But I couldn't hear her anymore. All her sincerity seemed as empty as her earlier words. All I saw in front of me was a person who got the punishment she deserved. At some point she realized that this was the end, that there would be no more attempts to resume the relationship, no more forgiveness. She gathered her things, rose heavily from the table and without looking at me, walked towards the exit. I looked after her, feeling a strange satisfaction and lightness. This meeting had set the final stage. Now she was really out of my life. After that, I went home, closed the door behind me, and breathed in. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Lana was now just a part of the past, and I had a clean slate in front of me where I could start over. After that meeting, I realized that I was finally free. It was a strange feeling, as if I had woken up after a long dream, in which I had been pulling an unnecessary weight. I no longer felt anger or resentment. There was only a slight sense of contentment and calm. Everything that was going to happen had happened. Lana realized that her dreams of a rich life had been shattered, that her betrayal had led to the collapse of everything she had known. And I was finally able to put a stop to it. Life slowly got back on track. I changed jobs, started doing things I really enjoyed, and even started meeting new people. My social circle changed, and among these people I felt different, confident, free, without the feeling that someone was pulling me down. Friends who knew my story said that I was different, that I had a hardness and calmness about me. Looking back, I realized that this ordeal was a kind of test for me. It showed me who I was and made me realize that you shouldn't be afraid to let people go, even if they were once a part of your life. I knew now that it was important to value yourself and not let anyone take advantage of your trust for their own selfish interests. I never saw Lana again. I heard from acquaintances that she had moved to another city, trying to start over. Perhaps she had found someone who could lavish her with attention and gifts again, but that didn't matter to me anymore. She was gone from my life, leaving only a lesson that I would remember forever. Now that I look back on it all, I can say one thing: sometimes fate gives us unexpected surprises that seem hard and unfair. But if you're able to endure it and come out stronger, then it wasn't all for nothing. Sometimes loss turns out to be the truest freedom. I had lived the story and was ready to move on.